All right, so it is 6:33. We're gonna try to get started on time this evening. She is here. Hi. So I'm going to call the meeting to order, the Community Preservation Committee. We are having the second evening of presentations of applications for our second round of funding. Just as to let people know before we get started, we accept comments from anyone on any of the applications. The format is going to be that we're going to ask applicants to give a brief presentation about their project, and then we'll entertain questions from the committee members. And then if there are any questions from the audience, we'll take questions from the audience as well. And if anyone would like to submit comments about any of the projects, whether they are the projects that are under discussion being presented this evening or the other projects that were presented in our previous evening of presentations, we have posters in the lobby that you can sign your name to or put some notes, and we also have note cards that you can leave in the comment box in the lobby. And if people are watching this on a recording and are not at the media center this evening, they can send their comments to the CPA administrator, Danielle Evans, at Town Hall. And her email address can be found on the Community Preservation Committee's website. So with that, I would like to invite our first applicant to come forward. That is the City of Medford Office of Community Development.
Good evening. My name is Clodagh Stokerlaw. I'm a planner with the Office of Community Development. My application today is for design funding for Phase 2 of Harris Park. I'm sure you recall that back last Christmas I came for an out of order application for Phase 1 for the design and construction of Harris Park, which is located on Middlesex Avenue between 2nd and 3rd Street. It's a 2.5 acre park. Phase 1 was awarded $300,000 from Federal Land and Water. You also gave $300,000, and the remaining $217,000 has been appropriated by the city. We've just recently executed the MOU with Danielle, for this work, and the design has just started. We were hoping that the design will take a few months, maybe go out a bit about Christmas, to get into construction at the beginning of the construction season next year, probably April, and probably 4 or 5 months, so be finished in end of July, early August. That would be the hoped for trajectory. So I have brought some extra little mini grant applications, with the essence, if anyone needs one, if anyone wants to look at them. You may recall Phase 1 was a very highly active area with playgrounds and swings and all that kind of thing. Phase 2 is a much larger area. It's made up of the fields area, and as you see in your application, it involves redoing of the fields to make them, to have a softball field, but to make it possible to use the space for instance, at a tournament, 3 junior soccer fields, or a farmer's market, or some community use that might be desired. It also involves the creation of a rain garden along 3rd Street. We're trying to be progressive and environmentally conscious with our work now, and when we have an opportunity. And then it also involves some accessibility improvements, just some extra paths around the field, and also involves street edge improvements along Middlesex Avenue. The design costs, and which has been submitted as a proposal, is the initial design cost is I think $106,000, and I have asked for the proposal plus 15% contingency. I mean, it always happens. For instance, I had a initial proposal for phase one for $106,000 or for $100,000, and it turns out to be 106. So I'm only at the very beginning, and I'm already into contingency. But that it always happens that you need it, and of course, if we didn't use it, you get it back anyway. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I think you've all seen the proposal. I've given a very brief outline of what it is. So, thank you.
Are there questions from the committee?
Sure.
Yes.
Claudia, it was the first project, as you mentioned, was out of sequence. I think this board collectively thought it was a good project. Obviously, they awarded $300,000. To be honest, we took a little bit of heat from that because it was the first thing we'd ever done, and it seemed to set a tone that this was just going to be something the city of Medford kind of had as right, and I don't think that was the intent. But I want to kind of assure that the approach the city takes for not only phase two, but for a future project going forward is something that is the spirit and the letter of our goals and guidelines, which is obviously that it's not maintenance, it's meant to do a certain go above and beyond what the city should normally be doing on a yearly, annual basis for all its 26, 27 parks across the city. Could you address those issues maybe in the context of a master plan for all the open space in the city and how this fits into that as well?
Well, it just happens that we're just about to start the new open space plan update. I've just executed a contract with MAPC. We went out, we did an RFP. We had just 2 applicants. We interviewed both, and MAPC seemed to be best able to address the things we wanted. This particular open space plan is also, we got funding from EOEA for also to build in some climate action components into it. So it's going to be a bigger, a more sort of broadly focused open space plan than in the past, which was totally focused on really rehabilitating parks.
And what year was the last plan, the last full plan?
The last full plan was 2011.
Okay.
Every 7 years you need to do a plan to be eligible for funding.
Right.
So we're just about to start that process. It will involve, they're going to just start doing their research. They'll do a lot of outreach. There will be also 3 public meetings, and obviously we'll be, getting an input onto what people want, also what's necessary. As you can see with this plan, it's a complete rehab. I mean, it's not maintenance. It's not maintenance of fields. It's not maintenance of coast. It's like tearing it down and starting from scratch in both components, and then making a totally new, state-of-the-art park, which has the components that people wanted, that people have asked for. And we're aware when we do grant applications what the criteria are, and that's why we've come for a new park. It's essentially a new park. It's not like the Crystal Campbell Park or
Sure.
Riverside Avenue, which we created from scratch, from nothing. But it is a total rehab in 2 particular phases.
And do you anticipate doing this every year, a different park kind of this scale and magnitude, or something different?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, but the open space plan and what the people define will inform that. I mean, we'll go through this process, which I anticipate taking about 6 months, and that will inform the next plan. And we generally try and follow the plan. They must be there's a 7-year plan which is part of the open space plan, and you have to identify what you want to do and kind of how much it will cost. Sometimes an opportunity comes up and something different happens. For instance, most of it, we completed several of the projects that we hadn't originally in the 2011 plan, but for instance, the Crystal Campbell Peace Garden had not been envisioned in that plan. And then you had the bombings and all that kind of thing. And so that changed that, and we were able to go after this funding and that funding, and there was very strong support from a lot of different sources for that. So that happened, which it wasn't in the plan. Right. But in general, we will be trying to follow the plan, which has been informed by what the public and their participation has asked for.
Is there a metric we can use from the last 7-year plan to see what percentage of projects the city did complete in that time period?
I haven't analysed that, but we have certainly done 4 or 5 large projects. And of course, you never know whether you'll get them funded. I mean, we've been very successful in getting funding. Years ago, when the city was poorer, we were able to use HUD funding for this kind of thing, but there were very, very few places now where HUD funding can be used for a park. So we have to try and get funding from other sources. So, you know, I always go after whatever I can. And then I try, you know, for every single source. And that's the way we're, you know, you're just trying to do the best you can with what you can get.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, I have a couple of questions. My first was, will there be a process for providing neighborhood input into the design of the park?
Yes. Now, there was the initial grant application, which was done, which was for the, you know, the land and water funding. There was a public process for that, and so there were concept plans drawn up. They're just concept plans. We're working on phase 1 now, just started, but there will be, and we're working on the basic, you know, pieces that are in the concept plan, because that's what's been funded.
Mm-hmm.
You know that, and so, but we will go to the public with, at some stage before we finalize the plans, we'll have a neighborhood meeting, and we'll get input, and we will do some tweaking, and you know, as then when we get, you know, when we go forward and we get nearer and nearer to actually getting, you know, final drawings, when the real cost estimates are done. It may be that things have to be tweaked there because we may not have enough money for this. We may have to downgrade something or put in alternates or something, so that yes, there will be an opportunity, and there may be changes to get minor changes, because when you're grant funded, and it's the same with the grant that you've given us, you have, you know, we've said we want to do the blah blah blah, and you have said yes, we're funding blah 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 blah, so we cannot, you know, stray from that very much. But we will be getting input, and they will be, you know, people always have things to say, and there are tweaks depending on what the public want.
Okay. And the other question was whether shade trees would be incorporated into the park design, particularly for both the play areas and along the sidewalk.
We're not at that stage.
Okay.
Because we're in the concept stage. There are quite a lot of trees in the phase 1 area. They happen to exist, a lot of trees. So I don't know, there'll be some plantings. You know, at the moment in the budget we have plantings.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have, you know, the design. We were going to, because there'll be a preliminary concept design, which will be a slight development of what you see. Then there'll be sort of a 25% plan, and then eventually, after our public meeting and after we've tweaked everything, and you know, there'll be a final plan which will be developed into plans and specs and go out to bid.
Okay. Thank you. Are there questions? Yes.
Hi, Bill O'Keefe. I'm with Method Little League. Like the design, like the project. I'm just curious. It's a girls' softball field. Is that part of the grant that has to be a girls' softball field? Was there any consideration in terms of a boys' baseball field?
At the time, you know, we were understanding that it was a girls' baseball or softball field that was necessary. I think that if we'll say we go out, that there's a, you know, when we do the open space plan during the period, that there's a need to change it, or there's you know, and if it's possible, I don't know. You know, that is not completely out of the question. Okay. However, we would have to get permission to change it.
And the reason I say this is because the last 3 parks that were done, all the girls' softball fields have been done. The baseball fields haven't been touched in, Jimmy, I gotta say, at least 3 or 4 decades, unless it's by volunteer money, which is fine, and I can accept that. I know it's under the HUD grant in terms of Columbus. I understand Webster Park was done over. Those are 2 girls' softball fields. Are you aware of the number of people that participate in girls' softball? Do you have that number?
No, I don't. But you know what? This is the reason that when you see, especially the first one, when you see the notices for the open space plan, need to come and need to, you know, make your case, because
Well,
it's gonna be the
just
plan
clear,
for the next
I've
7
been doing
years.
this for 15 years. I've never seen any notice. I've never been emailed about anything, which is fine. I'll look for it. Next thing I just wanna talk to you about is the field gonna be ADA accessible? Like-
Everything we do
Sure.
it has to be.
Sure, so even with the stadium seating too as well, are we gonna have bleachers?
We're not, you know, we're not at that stage. I doubt it.
Yeah,
But we're at the concept phase. We're at exactly, you know, if you've seen have you seen the,
no, I can take one. though.
please do.
Yeah,
So this is just a very
yeah,
quick version of the, that is what we're looking at right now. It's at a very, very basic ideas phase.
sure.
And
I'll
we're-
definitely email you on some of the other things too as well in terms of this, because all our parks, none of them basically meet that standard. The other thing I just wanted to basically bring up, a concession stand.
That would be something that we couldn't deal with. I think that would, you know, I think that would be maybe something that might be done afterwards by the city or with the city. That's not the
Yeah.
kind of thing we could deal with.
Well, one of those things that you definitely wanna consider, because the way Medford is evolving right now, where you have so many new people moving into Medford, that's how you build that camaraderie, the partnership, and it's one of those investments where you're basically recycling communities' money, where the PTOs or some other organization, civic or otherwise, can utilize that, not only for branding of Medford product, but also just basically to provide resources for adaptive students because of the culinary arts programs that are available. So just something to look at that I think would be beneficial when we start to look at these open spaces in order to basically give access and opportunity for everybody to basically participate. But I
That's a
appreciate
good thing,
that.
and that's,
Yes.
you know, even if a grant application couldn't, you know, provide for a concession stand, it is conceivable that a space might be identified.
Yes, exactly, and that's just one of those things in terms of when you start to build that stuff out in terms of the big picture.
Thank you, yes.
So just a couple questions about the project. Is it gonna be natural grass? Or is it gonna be-
Yes.
Okay, is, lights?
No.
No lights, so just, daylight.
I'm sorry, can you give us your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, John Grazio, 10 Pelican Way.
If you'd like to take it again,
I'm
it's,
also with Medford Little League.
Mr. Remember, these are just conceptual plans now, and it's just a, yes, sure. These are a very quick little synopsis.
And if I can, in terms of, Doug, what Doug said too, in terms of your role and responsibility, this would be ideal in terms of a cookie cutter going forward for the parks in our community. We have a lot of parks in our community that, you know, I mean, the return on the value in terms of the car parks, you know, I mean, the Tufts Park, having this type of design, conceptualizing this, will only engage kids in the community a lot more to be active. So we'd appreciate any type of information on it forward. I'll send you my information. But I think this is a great start, and I think to build on that in terms of a cookie cutter for the future would be ideal, especially with this is the pioneer stage of the Community Preservation Act, so.
Yeah, if I could just chime in on that, thank you, Mr. O'Keefe, that's helpful. I think there's, obviously with 26 parks across the city, it seems like there needs to be a more comprehensive plan in terms of funding beyond grants for both CPA, federal. I mean, you can do a lot with grants, and I appreciate, and I'm sure the taxpayers appreciate that their monies are being leveraged as much as possible with as much. But just doing what seems to me to be a fundamental investment for the city by majority grant doesn't seem like the right solution. We were lucky on phase one that we were able to fund every single project that came before us, including yours out of sequence, which I was pleased with, because that means that we didn't have to say no to anybody on phase one. And I'm hoping we do the same thing on phase two, but I'm sure there'll come a time where that won't happen, and the tough choices will have to be made, and I just want to see the city have a longer term plan and vision for how to fund the infinite needs of the parks across the city for all sports. And this neighborhood in Wellington is well deserving. This is underutilized, this park. We know that's why we supported it in phase one. We realized that, as you mentioned in the proposal, it did hit many of the requirements, many of the goals from the preservation plan that was put together by this committee. So I think if we can understand the larger context and vision going forward, not tonight, obviously, but how you're going to tackle the other 26 going forward over the next 10, 15 years, whatever it is, I think that would be useful to this committee and to everyone in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. And we'll ask the next applicant, which is the Brooks Estate Land Trust, to come forward.
Good evening, Tom Lincoln, President Medford Brooks Estate Land Trust. We have 3 applications here. You can tell me which one you want to talk about first.
We have first on the agenda the trail restoration.
Oh, okay, I didn't see the agenda, my apologies. The Brooks Estate, as you know, is 50 acres of conserved and protected open space on the northwest corner of Medford. The CPA committee and the CPA folks have been kind enough to fund 3 grants in the round 1, which we're hoping to get started on soon. We need to get the grant agreement, et cetera. And this is these grants here, including the Trails grant, are a continuation of our overall vision for the Brooks Estate, which has been worked on for a long time. Pieces have been done, but not all of it. It's a very large project. The Trails Restoration Project, basically fairly simple. There are some core trails, walking trails that are heavily utilized by dog walkers, joggers, birders. My favorite statistic in the last few years is that bird watching is the 2nd fastest growing hobby in the United States. And I bet you didn't know genealogy is the first. So, any rate, we want to make these key portions of the trails more aesthetically pleasing, more sustainable, more user friendly. And this also, I think, has some other benefits, collateral benefits, as we've described the project. So we want to remove, as on a volunteer basis, there's some asphalt, probably dating from as far back as Brooks Village after World War II, on some short portions of the trails. We want to use wood chips in a standard way, used in many, many open space projects to enhance the trails. This is better for people's legs running, etc. It looks better and it's more sustainable. That's about 1,300 linear feet, as we've estimated it. On the base of this area, near what we call the boardwalk parking area, which has been provided for a long time, since the boardwalk was installed in 1994. We want to provide a simple, tasteful, informational kiosk with a reference map. You've seen these things if you've walked on DCR properties, et cetera. And to help users orient themselves, also provide a place to put up interstitial information. We also want to use the graphic basis from that to provide both an online and perhaps hard copy trail map and guide. We've used a variety of informal publications to date, but we'd like to up our game here for the public. There are a couple interesting possibilities here too. The general thinking is that the initial wood chips will be purchased, but installed by volunteers. Mark Warren on our board has had extensive experience with this, working with the Appalachian Mountain Club. But we think there's an opportunity to help the city out on a mutual basis in later maintenance, I guess is the right word, of the trails. The DPW produces a certain amount of wood chips. In fact, they have a large pile of it down at the DPW yard. I've talked with Brian Cairns about this. That's number one. Number two, more interestingly, there is a huge mass of tree trunks, et cetera, in the so-called stump dump area in the middle of the Brooks Estate, which is ripe, is that the right word? Ripe for conversion, perhaps to wood chips. And the beauty of that, of course, is literally a couple hundred yards from where it would need to be applied. And that, frankly, the amount of wood there has built up greatly in the last 3 or 4 years, and it would be a win-win situation to reduce that biomass to some extent. But certainly the wood chips as I understand it from Mr. Cairns, are available pretty much now at the DPW. The DPW has always had, at least the time I've been in Medford, the last 30 years, has had a shortage of space for stockpiling and that kind of thing. Wood chips, mulch, et cetera, so that, things that can be removed from the DPW yard, which I think will help them also in that respect. Our intention is to contribute 25% of the grant. This is we're asking for $6,500, and the total cost is $86.55. Probably a more specific number than might otherwise be possible. So that's what we got here for this.
Thank you. Questions from board members? I have a couple of questions.
Okay, good, go ahead.
The number one question that we discussed before, and we've been continuing to try to do some research on this question, is whether wood chips are actually ADA compliant for a trail surface. And as we continue to try to get a solid answer on that question, do you see an alternative at the moment, or
Well,
have
here-
you considered alternatives for trail surface?
The basic design for what we're proposing here is based on what's been done at Habitat in Belmont, which is owned by Mass Audubon, who is certainly an organization that's entirely cognizant of these sorts of issues. And again, I'm not an expert in, there are probably a number of alternative surfaces, depending on how naturalistic you want this to look, and we want this to look naturalistic. The other thing about wood chips is as they decay, they return into the environment nicely. But I think what I would suggest is that we get back, I certainly can do this, get back with Mass Audubon and see, how they've addressed this issue. Because they have multiple properties, and they're certainly going to be.
Well, it actually, an appropriate place to get the information might be the Massachusetts Access Board.
Oh, sure.
So that we could, because Mass Audubon may not themselves be doing things, in the way that they ought to be for ADA accessibility. So I wouldn't.
Yeah, I can talk MAAB. That's true.
Yeah. So it would be. That's I think our greatest concern
Okay.
about this is the use of wood chips and whether that will be a problem. And then, what follows from that is if the answer is not wood chips and we need to look at another surface, whether that might dramatically change the cost of the project, the estimate for carrying
certainly
out this.
possible.
Yeah.
If I could ask on that, the MBOW board has dealt with the MAB obviously on the accessible lift in the manor in the past, so we know them, I suppose, I could say. But one of the challenges here, as opposed to just about in any park in Medford, is that the geography here and the grading, there's like a 50-foot change from, the part of the estate in the northwest corner closest to the Winchester Grove Street. ADA requires 2% slope, and
Yeah.
there are places in this estate that's probably 10, 12%, or anything in between. So it's a real challenge. There's limited accessibility, but I think the goal that Tom has always had is to make the entire estate as accessible as possible wherever we can. And I think it's certainly a good point to pursue this further to understand what is possible.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that may not be able to, we may not be able to get an answer on that before we officially end this funding cycle. However, I think it might be possible to extend, especially given that we have flexibility with the funding requests that we have this time.
Sure.
That we might be able to give an extension to answer that question so that we can fund the project the way it ought to be completed, rather than rushing to give an up-down answer before we know really what it's going to take to do this project.
That's excellent. Sorry, I don't have the second one you want is, or maybe the other questions?
I'm just checking my notes to see if I have any further questions on this. The only other question or suggestion that I might have for this is that you're the second applicant to come to us this round with a request for placing a kiosk in a park. And, you know, this is a valid accessory to passive recreation. But I wonder whether if we're building two kiosks at the same time, especially if we're going to be asking the city to provide the labor to do those kiosks, whether we can coordinate. It's also the Historical Commission, I believe. It
Maybe
has,
get a 2-for-1 deal, is that what you're looking
yeah, exactly.
If I
There's a
could,
question.
I'd love to see them at all the parks.
for? Good point.
And that's what I was gonna bring up. I thought, Tom, that was a great idea. The Garden Club, has one down at the Garden Club. I worked with the Garden Club back in 2015 in terms of that whole kiosk mindset. That would be ideal, not only for branding of the parks, but also advertising in terms of what the money's going to, in terms of, hey, it's that whole project scope, what they do with every other project, and it becomes a community board too as well. So that's just something I'm just bringing up, because I thought that was great when I saw it. I've seen it in other communities. I think it'd be, I mean, a good ROI.
That's a very good point, because once we get a couple of these built, obviously we'll know exactly the cost. The design can be replicated, can be adapted to any park. I think it's a really good idea.
And if I can too, you have the carpentry department here for the vocational school. They're the ones that are building concession stands and doing a whole host of other things that they're able to replicate into the community. I think this kiosk, in terms of these carpentry, group here, I met them a couple of weeks ago to do a few things. I think they'd love this type of challenge in terms of putting their emblem on it, and then they'd have, I mean, obviously the moniker of whatever you want. What they're doing right now is they've just done the alphabet, both in wood and cement, in order to do the branding for signage and different postings when they do get requests for spelling things out with names and numbers. So it's just something if you haven't taken a
Thank
look
you.
at. I mean, but Tom, that'd be great. So I know
Okay.
you put a lot of work into it.
It should be noted that the first kiosk we funded is in the same geographic area at the Oak Grove Cemetery.
We haven't actually funded it yet.
That's
We've
right, I'm
just
sorry.
considered it.
We
Thank
heard.
you.
Jumping ahead.
Thank you. So, your second project on the agenda, I'm sorry, yes.
Just to, like to make a comment on that, as Mr. Carr pointed out, the 2% slope. My name's David from Metro Little League.
David,
Wheeler.
David Wheeler, okay.
30 years in construction, done a lot of projects with DCR. They basically flatten anything out to make it handicap accessible and do a gravel base. When you go into a walking trail or something like that, they just run the grade as it is. There's no way to flatten a mountain out, and that's how they handle it. That it's a natural terrain, and they do the best they can to it. You can't, their attitude on some projects are, you can't destroy nature to get into nature, and there's all kinds of products, but they tend to go with gravel and sand, which isn't really woodsy, but it's a flat level surface that can sustain ADA. Wood chips are their next choice, so I think he's heading in the right direction. I don't think you're gonna get anyone to give you an official stamped answer, because there is none. As Mr. Carr pointed out, it's gotta be the law is the 2% slope, so they can't deviate from that in making something accessible.
Thank you. All right, so the next project on the agenda for you is the stone wall restoration.
Okay, there is a 1,475-foot, by our estimates or our measurement, stone wall along Grove Street, put in, we believe, by the Brooks family in the 19th century. This is a major design element defining the edge of the property. It's very visible. Grove Street gets a remarkable amount of traffic. And we've been studying this. We've been working to think about, what would a restoration look like? How would it be accomplished? Some of the issues. And what we did back, where are we now? October, back in February, when the vegetation is less, is basically divide, working with Dana Gallup, who's our volunteer consultant, years and years of experience as a landscape designer and architect and landscape contractor. Divide, what needs to be done into some categories, ranging from there's no wall left to their walls, virtually intact, and assign some linear lengths to that. Did some bottoms-up cost estimating for a dry stone wall construction. We know the historic size, of the wall based on about 40% of the walls left, more or less. What's left. But the proposal here, this is a very large wall, obviously, 1,475 feet. The proposal here is to really call this phase 1 and to work from south to north from the historic entrance where the blue sign is, as we call it, along the right side of Grove Street. And using the analysis that we conducted earlier, we've also applied, since it was February and now it's not February, applied an inflation increase of I think 9%. We've reached the total project budget of $50,750, in which we were asking for $45,000, and we'll pay the balance. And we always want to contribute to the bottom line here. This is a pretty simple wall. I'm not a mason, obviously. It's about 2 feet high, about 2.5 feet deep. There's some basically it's built on gravel or several inches of gravel, at least modern construction. I'm not sure they did that in the 18th century or 19th century. And really, it's a matter of materials and labor per foot, based on existing conditions. We're going to contribute $5,750 to the project, or estimated 11.3%. So a wall is a wall, and we think this will give us a very good start on the overall project. We didn't want to come and say, how about funding a 1,475-foot wall, or 60% of it, that sort of thing.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee members? Okay, I have a question. How much vegetation removal do you anticipate is going to be required for this?
Well, it varies depending where you are along the wall. There's a certain amount of vegetation on top of the wall, mostly a vine. There's one portion actually in this 300 feet. I'd say it's about 20 feet long, where there's some weed trees, or sumacs, I guess you call it, that sort of thing. The land actually, the general topography kind of slopes away back from it and back of the wall. And it's actually fairly clear. There's a few, maybe some larger bushes here and there. But it's also the kind of thing, you clear it once, bang on it periodically. This vegetation's had a long time to establish itself there.
Well, my question was inspired by the recent controversy along Boston Avenue of the removal of all the trees. And so I just want to anticipate whether there's going to be a similar shock if there's an area where trees, even if they're weeds.
I can't envision that. Most of the vegetation is growing on the wall, or is bush-like vegetation near it. What happens is as a wall, as organic material, decays, it gets in between the stones, and plants can get a foothold there. There are a couple of dead trees, smaller dead trees that are very close to the wall. They would have to be removed.
Yeah.
But this basically, the idea here is this is a defining historic and aesthetic element. You have basically understory, an open area there, and then the woods kind of moves in there and then starts going uphill to the east.
I would just want to know ahead of time and be able, for the neighbors to know ahead
Sure.
of time if there's going to be, a really stark difference in the landscape outside their door.
Of course, the interesting thing is if you drive up Grove Street and you look at the color of the stone on the wall and look across the street at the other stones.
Yeah. But you're not gonna raid people's yards to.
We're not quarrying from the neighbors. no.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Question?
If I ask, so, Tom, with this wall, we're extending it? Is
No,
that-
it's
Just
based entirely on
restoring
the
it?
historic footprint of the wall.
Right, so it's the existing wall that's
Yeah,
there?
but as I mentioned, this is a sort of a phase one.
Yeah.
In terms, and actually the southern portion, which is actually closest to the entrance, where you want the aesthetic effect most immediately, is also the place where, more of the wall is missing. The 40% is almost almost all on the northern half. This
Right.
wall ends at the Winchester line.
No, you're familiar, I just, like, anything that's gonna be done, as you know, people access over that wall all the time, so they're basically climbing over it. So my whole thing is if there'd be an opportunity to make an egress, or something that'll allow people, instead of going over the wall, there's an entranceway or a pathway that allows them to go behind it, both from a safety standpoint with the winter that comes, as well as
Well,
just the whole aesthetic.
if you go behind it, you're not accessing the trails.
No, but they walk behind it instead of walking in the street at night because of the lighting and stuff like that. But maybe that's on a different phase or something like that, where the lighting can
Well,
accentuate for, yeah.
the first guiding principle is there's an historic wall there.
Yes.
In terms of that. There is, I should have misspoke here slightly, there is a serious wide opening at the northern end, and then there's one final piece that takes you to the Winchester line. There's about a 50-foot gap there, I think.
Yeah, it's more towards the restoration.
The other thing this will help with, it will certainly improve the aesthetics of the entrance itself. In our long-term plan, this entrance never had a gate, as far as we can tell historically.
Sure.
In fact, the two big stone things were moved, I believe, by the city probably 70 years ago
Sure.
from the Winchester end of the thing.
And I'm sure when the design scheme's done, lighting will emulate it, so I'm sure that'll be spoken for when that phase comes in too as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tom, can I ask you a question about this? Out of interest, has the Brooks Estate completed any sort of cultural landscape reports and kind of analysis of the entire landscape?
There is a lot of stuff. We did a historic landscape analysis working with Harvard, this is some time ago. These are pieces of the master plan. The thing about the Brooks Estate is the historic core with the manor and the carriage house is that's where the built environment was. This is not something where there were scattered farm buildings, across the landscape. So you basically had the historic core, the hand-built road, access drive from Grove Street, this wall along Grove Street, with completely naturalistic ponds, et cetera. I mean, the landscape's changed a lot. I mean, you have forest succession that's taken place over the last 70 years. We're not cutting down 40 acres of forest.
I guess my question is, of all of the, historic restoration or renovation projects that the Brooks Estate has to do, how is this identified as being sort of a project for now or a priority project?
Well, it's something, starting with our thinking about the entrance and moving from there. And I think, frankly, it's the visibility that's important. It's not an attractive face for the Brooks Estate, and it's in terms of a major naturalistic built, historic built thing that it's hard to think of. Nobody built a wall or a patio along the pond, et cetera, historically. So you basically have the manor yard, that historic core landscape there, the access drive, and most of the trails at the Brooks Estate were not there in the 19th century either. In fact, there's a certain number of social trails, I think.
Tom, there's, if people are interested, they can get the master plan. It's probably 200, 300 pages long, but there's probably 50 or 60 or 70 pages on a landscape that would be part of that. So if anyone's interested, they can certainly plug in think through the MBL website to get the whole plan or whatever piece they want to see.
I think in the earlier round, I provided the entire plan on
You
disk.
may have
I'm pretty
a
sure.
link or something.
Yeah.
I've been able to find portions of it, but not the whole.
Okay, well, we can certainly,
The,
that's
I'm
certainly.
happy to
It's a
give you
binder,
a
but we can
CD.
certainly provide that.
Yeah, we don't have, the print versions cost a fortune to make it, you know, I still remember, yes. And of course, you know, that part of the plan actually is fairly timeless, you know, some of the other aspects have aged.
It might be helpful if the plan was entirely available on the Brooks Estate website, is it? And maybe in sections?
I think it is, I think there's a PDF per chapter, I think it's.
It's a
on
very
the-
large document.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has,
Okay.
But
I'll double check on that.
yeah, we can certainly get a hard copy for this group, I think.
Print it out in black and white.
Particularly as it looks like we're getting multiple projects, which is
Yeah.
great from the Brooks Estate. It'd be great to be able to have that larger perspective.
I mean, the thing is about it's an historic landscape, but it's really an historic naturalistic landscape. It's changed through the vicissitudes of time from a, you know, open field farm like gentleman's farm, I don't know quite what the right word is, to, you know, a mixed oak and maple forest. You know, the pond looks remarkably like it does in the 1880 photographs, you know, and we
Good
talk-
hockey rink.
What's that?
Good hockey rink.
Yeah, all you need is ice.
Oh, it's there.
Yeah, I think last year, I don't know, I remember going by and seeing about 4 pickup games.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's a wonderful scene, actually.
It is, it's ideal.
I mean, I couldn't skate to save my life.
I've skated there many times now, right the Brooks.
And now we'll have someplace warm to go, thank you, Tom.
Oh, here we go, 2016 master plan summary.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
So, we'd like to move on to your last project.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm
which
taking
is-
so much of
sorry.
your time here.
No, that's,
This is the restoration of, for lack of a better term, the third floor wood trim and associated elements on the manor. As we've talked about earlier, we've made, starting way behind the 8 ball, made tremendous progress in historic restoration of the manor, both the interior and the exterior. This is a tall building. It's a large building. It's, I think, almost 70 feet from top to bottom in the back. And the third floor trim, including the sides of the dormers and associated elements, needs scraping, painting, repairs, that sort of thing. So the application has a lot of detailed photos, I believe, and drawings. This is pure historic restoration of existing architectural fabric. Again, we're proposing we provide 10% of the funding, basically pay for the drawings, detailed drawings of the project. This, and I think I'm probably anticipating a question, this kind of work requires MHC approval. I think we have an excellent relationship with Mass Historical Commission in terms of all the other projects that we've either managed or funded ourselves.
thank you. Are there any questions from committee members?
Just
Yeah.
curious, how much of the manor is restored to this point?
Basically, on the interior, the rooms are all serviceable. We're missing some historic elements, or restored historic elements like chandeliers, a couple chandeliers. It's very difficult to find a perfect chandelier, apparently. Joked about that before. We have, I don't want to take your whole day here, but the worked on the electrical. We've provided a new caretaker's kitchen. We've provided an ADA bathroom. We've done a new boiler. I mean, that's not brand new, but put a new boiler, a new electrical panel, and some associated wiring over the years. 70 new windows and shutters, slate roof, and related elements, the west porch, which is a 2-story Victorian porch. It's on the west. It's actually the back of the building. The veranda, the south veranda, restored some historic elements that had been turned into doors over the years. Refinished the floors, done a lot of painting, provided new door hardware. We've upgraded the alarm system. We've spent a lot of money and a lot of time working on this. The first floor, as somebody mentioned, the first floor is handicap accessible. We have a handicap entrance. On the north end of the building, we have a lift that will take people to the second floor so they can access the very nice second floor back west porch, and the room is on that end of the building. The vision here has always been, this is not a museum. It's not the kind of place where you're going to have a red velvet rope, and look at a room full of Victorian furniture. It's really designed to be used. We provided a certain amount of function furniture, tables and chairs, that sort of thing. And as we've said in round one, the major impediment to a lot of use of the building at this point is the condition of the access drive, which.
Thank you. I realize that you have a tremendous amount of experience in doing restoration work on the building. So I just wanted to see if you can comment on the estimate that you included in this proposal and.
Well, this is the bottom-up estimate based on standard measurements in terms of the type of work, linear footage, that kind of thing. We have measured drawings of the exterior that allows us to do this of the building. This is pretty straightforward work. It's scraping and painting, some replacement of cedar shakes, that sort of thing. If you look at Appendix B here on the cost estimate, it's almost all scraping and painting. Part of the cost, the higher cost, I think, compared to a ranch house or something, is the height and the accessibility for the work. The good thing is this place was beautifully built. I mean, it's 139 years old, 138 years old, and we've made a lot of improvements. We hope to finish. This will really, I think, pretty much finish off the exterior restoration. The other thing I forgot to mention, we rebuilt 5 chimneys, which have a 55-foot draw, I will have you know.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So then we would like to call the next applicant, which is the City of Medford Mayor's Office and the Housing Authority.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Allie Fisk, and I am the Business and Cultural Liaison in Mayor Burke's office. And I'm here to present the application for 2 bocce courts to be installed on Medford Housing Authority property, an initiative led by the City of Medford. So just to start very quickly, for those of you who aren't familiar, bocce is a social competitive pastime where people toss or roll balls and displace one another's balls to score points in a court that's typically 60 feet long by 12 feet wide, that's covered with gravel and sand. And so that's kind of the scene that we're talking about here. So the location that we've been discussing, as you can see here, is behind the Medford Senior Center and adjacent to a gazebo that's on Medford Housing Authority property behind the senior housing. So this is on Riverside Ave. The reason that this site has been selected is because of the proximity to the seniors who are already active in that area, both at the senior center as well as in the apartments. The other reason that this particular location was selected is that there are already amenities available in that space. So the gazebo has seating, there's lighting, there's parking, and it is already prime for the type of activity that bocce would be promoting. The proposed location, as I had said, is next to the senior center. The bocce courts will be at the south and the west. This is a little bit switched, but the south and the west of the gazebo there. The proposal for the bocce court is really important because it's going to provide an opportunity for the community to be able to take advantage of the court recreationally at their own leisure, but it also gives the Medford Recreation Department a facility to utilize for senior programming. It's something that they've been really prioritizing lately, and this will be another opportunity for them to utilize an amenity for both formal and informal recreational activities. The Medford Senior Center, Pam Kelly couldn't be here today, but she has written a letter in support and has done a tremendous amount of research on her end to see if the senior community, how they would respond to this. The Senior Center themselves will also be utilizing the bocce courts for their own programming. They have tremendous indoor programming, but they do not have a lot of outdoor recreation programming, in part due to a lack of facilities, particularly in close proximity. The bocce court is going to complete or participate in an ongoing network of recreational spaces in Medford Square. So the Riverside Plaza has been newly renovated. There's the Crystal Campbell Peace Garden in front of the Senior Center, and the soon-to-be constructed Clipper Ship Connector actually is going to travel right next to those bocce courts. So it's going to complement everything else that's happening in that area. The project is going to proceed in close partnership between the City of Medford and the Medford Housing Authority. We're going to be engaging a designer we have some concepts that are based on conversations with the Housing Authority, and particularly the Director of Modernization, who did do some initial plans to see if this would fit, which we've determined that it will, but we will be engaging a designer to actually fine-tune the plans, look at them and see how it's going to fit into the landscape that's there. There will be some landscaping to accommodate it, but for the most part, the amenities that exist already will stay there, and there will be ADA upgrades as well to make sure that the space is ADA accessible, especially considering the audience and the population that's going to be using the bocce court. So the partnership between the Housing Authority and the City of Medford will be the City of Medford is going to manage the contracts with the designer and the contractors who are selected to do the project. They will be handling all procurement. The Medford Housing Authority will actually be overseeing the construction of the project. It's on their property, and their Director of Modernization is on site and will be overseeing the project during the time that it's being constructed. The actual maintenance itself will be performed by the Housing Authority, but the costs for maintenance and repairs will be shared by the city and the Housing Authority in agreements to be determined. So the total estimate for the project is $69,100, which covers the cost of design, landscaping, the actual installation of the bocce courts, infrastructure changes to accommodate the ADA accessibility needs, as well as the actual tools of maintenance and the bocce court sets themselves. The Medford Housing Authority will be providing $6,000 in in-kind services in the form of the Director of Modernization, who's going to be the project overseer. The amount being requested from the Community Preservation Commission is $51,825, which is 75% of the total cost of the project. The city will be covering the remaining costs, which is budgeted at this moment to be $11,275. The quote for the bocce court was actually secured in April of 2017. We had originally selected a site for these bocce courts then at the intersection of Clipper Ship Drive and Riverside Ave, where the farmers market used to formerly be. We determined it was not a safe or adequate location, and at that point went to the Medford Housing Authority to see if they would be open to allowing us to put the bocce courts on their property, and of course they agreed. So the quote at that time that was for the Riverside Ave Clipper Ship Drive bocce courts is largely transferable to this new site. It's the same thing. It's construction. It's prepping the site. It's the cost of the fill that's going in there. So we used that quote and we adapted a little bit with some additional quotes from the Medford Housing Authority and the Department of Public Works for the additional work that's going to need to be done in the area. In regards to additional funding, we did seek a grant from the AARP Livable Communities grant, and we were not selected as a funding recipient at that time. The work is estimated to take about 4 weeks and will commence probably in April or May of next spring, making it so that it's ready by the late spring, summer, and fall for when that is most likely going to be its usable time period. We are very confident that the project is going to serve a very important community need. It aligns completely with what the Community Preservation Commission has outlined in its plan, particularly the goals related to recreation funding. For instance, Goal 3, provide diverse recreation opportunities serving residents of all ages. And then within the second priority, create additional amenities, specifically create outdoor recreation gathering spaces for seniors. This is essentially what that is. This will be a gathering space for seniors on property where seniors are already living and playing, so we feel confident this will serve a very important need in Medford. So I'm available to answer any questions, but Jeffrey Driscoll, the Executive Director of the Housing Authority, is also here as well, and he can answer some questions for you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Questions?
Yeah.
Yes?
Could you repeat who you said did the design or figured that out? We couldn't hear that. And
Right.
also, you know, our concern when we were looking at this was for the south location. It seems very tight between the parking and the existing landscaping there, and there's 2 light poles in the middle. So it's not clear to me how that would work and whether it might not be better to have both of them side by side in the other location.
Would you like to speak to that, Jeffrey?
I'm sorry, could you actually step up to the microphone so that you're recorded? Yes, thank you.
My preference is to have the bocce courts side by side. And right now, they're designed one on the south and I think one on the east. And so that at this point in time, actually, I think that's the west. At this point in time, what my anticipation is that if we can somehow put those side by side, that would be the preference. And I think the socialization would be better for the participants. Insofar as the closeness to the parking lot, one of the ways we could address that is there's a perimeter around the gazebo of shrubbery. And more than likely, if we are to put it on the parking lot side, we would take that shrubbery out, and that would open up a significant amount of area. And then people would be able to walk from the gazebo directly to the courts. So there is sufficient space, I believe. It's a matter of what's going to fit best. If we put it on the side, we end up cutting down some trees. If we put it on the back, then I think that there'll be sufficient amount of room, but we would lose the shrubbery, which isn't really of great importance, and that would open up the gazebo
The main
directly.
concern with the side-by-side is there's one particular tree on that property, which is
Yep.
valuable shade, and we really don't want to do away with that,
Right.
which is why this was the plan that was being presented. But the designer that will be brought in to look at this will help us confirm the best option.
Yeah, and as I said, my preference is to have, whether it be on the side or in the back, the two are together. But the initial design was brought
So
forth
that's
with this.
still being considered. That's good to
Yes,
know.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The shrubbery is kind of creating a wall around the gazebo, and with the design of the clipper ship connector and this, it seems like we're trying to open up and make this more lively and activated. So it seems like the shrubbery should just come down, and you could, which would open things up visually, because that gazebo feels like it's a fort right now.
It does.
A
It
little
does.
bit.
It does to some extent. One of the things, too, that hasn't been mentioned yet is that this will allow the community to integrate themselves with the residents who live at this public housing site, and will allow the residents to participate with members of the community. It'll be a nice mix. And what we're anticipating is that hopefully this will be a draw for folks who will come to play bocce and say, well, you know what, this is a pretty good place to live. I might want to live here. Whereas they wouldn't have had that opportunity before. And the bocce court would afford us that opportunity.
That was gonna be one of my questions, because I think exactly that would somebody know that they can play here signage wise. I would
Yes.
wanna, that's important, I think, to,
There will be signage.
That's
We've also
perfect.
talked about how so Medford Recreation getting involved means that there's gonna be a lot of marketing about this as a public facility that the public can use. So, the recreation guide, our website, the city has a lot of ways to get the word out, so there will be a sign, but the sign's only gonna go so far. It's really gonna have to be about alerting people that this exists in different ways, and the senior center will also be integral in that process.
it's a great opportunity here. I think it looks pretty good.
There are 200 units in that building, and they're disabled and elderly folks. I have not gotten one negative comment from the residents, who are thrilled to have possibly the opportunity to use this.
And the bocce balls themselves will be made available by.
Yes, so people are gonna be able to take them from either the senior center or the recreation department. We have to work out the logistics of how that's gonna work, but they will be available to people during obvious operating hours. And if there's other ways that we can find some creative way to have a lockbox or another way that they could be accessible, we are looking into it.
Is there parking allotted for this facility?
There is sufficient parking in the back, and we are actually reviewing our parking needs there, and I believe there will be sufficient parking toward the back. One side is resident parking, the other side will be open parking also, so
Isn't there-
it's one of the things that we're actually contemplating, some additional parking there for this. And the one thing I can't commit to, but I am going to propose to my board, is additional monies for any needs that may come up, whether it be parking, whether it be lighting. One of the things that has been raised is security. We want to make sure that there's sufficient lighting there, not only on the immediate site, but also to and from the site.
So I just want to echo everything, I had every one of these questions and comments, so thanks, everybody. I didn't even know it was back here. It's very buried in back. You can't see it from the Clippership Drive or Riverside. So the signage is important to
Yes.
get people back there.
Absolutely.
I just pulled it up on Google Maps and now I know where it is.
Yes. It's a very cool site when you see it.
Yeah.
Just gotta get people there.
What is the gazebo actually used for today? To what extent is it being utilized by people?
It's used for planned events. It is used by the residents at times. It is the utilization, what I would consider to be significant? Not at all.
Okay.
Could it be used more? Yes. Would it be accessible for folks who are going to be playing bocce? Certainly. It's a huge gazebo. It's
Yeah.
very, very big.
It's a nice quiet spot.
It is. It is.
Thank you. Yes, a question, Tom?
I'm just curious how you reached the conclusion that you need 2 courts. I've been around Medford long enough to remember that they built a court when they built the fire station in South Medford. And if I recall correctly, I may be wrong here, it was actually made the wrong length. But I don't think it exists there anymore. I mean, was some sort of survey done in terms of potential demand here? I mean, I like playing bocce.
Right.
I'm not any good at it, and I don't know how to bet on it either, but and I'm getting up towards senior citizen age there. But at any rate, I'm just curious why
Right.
2 courts?
The idea with bocce and how we want to use it is we do want it to be possible to have coordinated community tournaments there as well. One bocce court is going to limit your ability to do those larger community events. So that was a big piece behind it. I don't know whether you have anything else to add, Jeffrey, on that matter?
Yeah, I will say that in a number of communities where I've seen bocce courts, I've not seen a single court. I've usually seen 2 or 4 courts.
Okay.
For whatever, I'm not a bocce player, so for whatever
You
reason.
take it up.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I've seen mosely 2. That was a discussion that we had from the very
And
beginning.
I'm sorry, one other question. I'm just curious. How is the sign up gonna work? You know, when you go to a tennis court, you have to sign up or somehow.
Yep.
Will that be
Yep, so-
on site or online or?
It would have to, I think that we're gonna have to work out those logistics. I spoke with Medford Recreation, they did say that they would manage the reservations of the bocce court. Like with a lot of the other parks, you do need to reserve them in advance, and there is an online system to do that. So we'll work out the logistics with them, and we'll make it as smooth as possible, understanding that not everyone has access to the internet as well, so we'll work out those
Will you have a
logistics.
preference for people that live within 100 feet? I'm just joking. No, I'm just curious, because this is it's on a public housing site, it's next to the senior housing. Are they gonna get 2/3 of the time?
That's not something that the housing authority is requiring.
Oh, okay, I was just curious.
Right.
'Cause
Well,
You hope it's so
I
popular
can
that
speak
people
on
are waiting.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah,
If we
sorry.
could, we also just kind of need to see what the demand is also, and how we manage it will depend a little bit on who's using it.
Can you comment?
Yeah, so there's actually 3 bocce leagues. There's one in Medford, there's one in Malden, and they have one in Everett too as well, where there's over 200 players. You need the 2 courts because what you have is you have couples bocces. So you don't wanna bog them down in terms of having 3-hour events. So that's why they have the dual courts, in order to basically standardize the competition as well as to increase the volume of play. What you're probably gonna end up doing through the rec department is setting up a league where it runs for 8, 6, 12 weeks, and then you have certain divisions, and then there's rankings, so on and so forth. That's similar to what it does. So, what you're doing in terms of a scope is ideal. You definitely need the two courts. If you're looking to parlay in terms of having some more information about it, They just built them down the Medford Boat Club, they designed them.
Great.
I mean, they had someone come in and basically scope it all out, so there's a template for them to basically utilize. Joe Casey, who's with the Medford Police, he'd be a great person to
Okay,
contact
perfect.
with
Yep.
regards to it, so,
Thank you.
yeah, that would be the value add.
And this is just kind of a
I'm
joke.
sorry, can I have your name for the record?
Edward Messina, I'm with the Medford Little League.
Thank you.
This is kind of a joke, because I'm probably the oldest one here. Okay? I came from East Boston. I don't know, I'm 72 today.
I'm 87.
Oh. You beat me.
You look good.
Thank you, you look fantastic.
Happy birthday.
When I was a kid in East Boston, we used to have bocce courts. You're gonna have the great pines so we can make the wine?
I don't think that's in the budget.
That's not in the budget, okay, that's what I wanted.
Down the street.
Thank you. Any more questions, comments?
Well, just,
Yes.
actually, I think was really helpful information about the league. I mean, I think, I was gonna make a comment about whether Medford Recreation was gonna start a league, so we'd certainly encourage them to do that, so that there's some, to help with the programming and utilization of it. I'm interested to learn that there's already some bocce courts in Medford, so I'm just curious, you know, I'd like to know whether they know that, and whether there's any, you know, coordination there.
Is the Wellington Yacht Club one, are they new?
I'm not sure if the Wellington Yacht Club has it, I know the Medford Boat Club has it.
Oh, sorry, that's what I meant to say,
Yeah,
excuse
and
me.
it's seasonal,
Mhm.
so, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where, yeah, I mean, they have the
Right.
teams and stuff
You
like
can't-
that, they do the.
that's
color.
only
That's
member
membership,
access though, right?
Oh, okay,
Is that member
membership.
only?
Okay.
Member only, yeah.
Okay.
So
But
then-
what
Alright,
you have
yeah.
here is you're gonna
Right.
have the seniors and the kids, and they'll be able
Right.
to basically parlay with each other in terms of just that
Yeah.
whole mentorship stuff, so it'll be great.
Medford Recreation, I think, really specializes in seeing what the community is that already exists that's doing this, trying to figure out where the gaps are. I think that creating a league would totally be something that they would be interested in. I haven't had the opportunity to speak with them in detail about that, but we'll also have to look to see. I didn't realize there was a Medford League as well, so there's more research to be done on the logistics of the operations of the court.
Yeah, Malden has one too,
Great.
and, there's a couple hundred people, and a lot of them are from Medford too, so, I'm sure they'll be excited to see this. You know, it's all cash prizes too, right?
Thank you for coming, Mr. O'Keefe. You've been very helpful tonight on multiple projects. So we appreciate you have an encyclopedia knowledge of many of the Medford
Oh, it's the
parks. So
it's the underground.
we appreciate the information and the insight. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next applicant this evening is Friends of Wrights Pond and the City of Medford Parks Department. I just see the Friends of Wrights Pond. Thank
Good
you.
evening. My name is John Bob Beatty. I live at 79 Aquavia Row. And I'm here with the, representing the Friends of Wrights Pond, who are in partnership with the City of Medford Park Department to help beautify the area around the bandstand at Wrights Pond. It's an area that has been neglected by the Friends of Wrights Pond. We have done an awful lot of work over the past 30 years of volunteering with the grit work of planting trees. I don't want to get into that, but if you've been up there, you can see the visuals yourself, that the area has become a beautiful site. This is the area, I'm not talking about this area, but the other areas have really enhanced the beauty of the pond area. So we're here for a proposal of approximately $5,000. Actually, we got an estimate of $4,845 to at least get us started in the project that we're interested in. We intend to plant flowering dogwood trees, a couple of flowering crabs, 4 rhododendrons, a couple of Japanese yews, some hydrangeas, various types of perennials, and ground cover, etc. It's an area right surrounding the bandstand. I'm going to guess it might be a half an acre, I didn't measure it. But it's an area that really needs help. And it will serve as I think, a beautiful welcoming area for those coming from the parking lot, which this site is adjacent to the cut-through path of the parking lot. And I think it would just enhance the area tremendously. In the past, some of you may be new to Medford. I could just go back a little ways, maybe 30, 35 years. Wrights Pond wasn't a welcoming area. Today, if you go there in the summer or in the spring or in the fall, you see many, many seniors who use it as a reading area. You see the bathers, you see the family network. It's a busy, I don't know the numbers they charge, I don't know, I think $25 to park for the year. But it takes in an awful lot of people, maybe 1,000, I don't know, the city would know that. We don't get involved in that. But like I say, we would like a grant. Most of the people who have worked there in the past have either died off or live in assisted living and things of that nature. And I'm still around. I'm one of the few. And I still go out and volunteer in the off season, and I pick up the trash, et cetera, because the pond is only open for a couple of months, from I think June 25th to about Labor Day. And so I will call the park department when the barrels have to be emptied and so forth. Just a small task, and it helps me to get my walking in. So anyway, that's what we're looking for. We would appreciate this very much. In the future, we're going to be coming back looking for irrigation. I've been doing it for 30 years with a hose, and carrying a hose around 100 feet is not easy. I try to educate the workers, the park workers, the young ladies and the young kids, and they do a great job for me, and they cooperate tremendously. But it's a lot to ask. And I think the irrigation next year, I think we got a quote for about $11,000 to do that. And it's our vision and our purpose to make the area beautiful and welcoming. And most of the people that go there truly appreciate it. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah,
You
I have
look
a
great.
question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you, yeah.
The cut-through path that you mentioned, I'm familiar with it. Is that going to be kind of improved at all as part of this?
Well, not as part of this project, maybe in the future. I expect, as long as I'm around, I'll be here looking for money to beautify the area. And we understand that this year we were a little bit late, and there was only a minimum amount of money available, so we just came in with a small project. But we want to add to this each year in different parts of the park. Winter kill of plants and things, they need to be, restored. And so every year would be a great help if this board would help us to preserve the area.
Thank you. Hold on one moment. You answered one of the questions that I wanted to ask, but I also wanted to ask whether, this is a very well-loved park in the area, and, it's kind of beyond the scope of the request that you're making for this project, which sounds like it's going to be a really cost-effective way to beautify a section of the park that really needs attention. But it's kind of difficult to imagine that you're the only person, or there's only a small group of people who have an interest in improving and beautifying and leading the stewardship of this park. And so I'd really love to see how it's possible to expand that group of people to
Well,
be
it
the
won't take
stewards.
much.
Yeah.
Because the Grace Episcopal Church their members, and we had hundreds every year. Whenever we put out a flyer or the information that we need volunteers, we get many, many volunteers. And we have, we discontinued doing this probably when Vin Giovanelli died. I don't know if those of you who know Vinny, he spearheaded this along with Claire Domenico and others. Excuse me. But anyway, I'm sorry. But Vinny spearheaded it, and we got all kinds of donations. Every single penny was from donations. And the volunteers, I mean, would get, on a Saturday or mostly Saturday, would get 100. And they were with their shovels and with their rakes to clean up, planting, et cetera, et cetera. And we haven't done it for a while because there aren't too many of us left. And all we have to do is set out a message that we need help, and they'd come over the mountains.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Are there any, just one quick question, sorry?
Question also.
Oh,
Yes.
And a couple more.
why don't you go ahead first? Go ahead.
Oh, I see that there's a component to remove invasive species,
Yes.
which is great. And
Yeah,
that-
there's poison ivy back there, and there's bittersweet, and there are other things.
Swallowwort and
Yeah, I just, the young kids go in there, you know, when they come with the family network, and that blows my mind when I see that. So we gotta get rid of it.
so you'll be coordinating with Alicia Hunt in the
Yes, I've
Conservation
already
Commission?
spoken with Alicia, yes.
And so the plants that you're going to be planting, I hope that they're going to be native species for the most part?
You're asking the wrong person on that. I told Mike Nesta, the director of the parks, what we would like, and he has spoken with ground masters, whom the city employs, and I don't think, I don't know if they're native,
Yeah.
but I know they're from the north and maybe Canadian or whatever in this region.
Right, native as opposed to strictly landscaping plants. But one of the incentives for planting native plants is that it's actually exempt from filing before the Conservation Commission.
I see.
So-
I didn't know that. Thank you.
So,
We can look into that.
okay.
Yep.
The one thing I would ask, is, if you're gonna be coming here, you know, every year for small or medium-sized projects, that sounds great, because I could see that over time, you would obviously redo the whole thing, but I think what would be helpful for us to see is, kind of a measured master plan drawing that could be something that we could adapt and show how it's going to all come together over the many years. And, you know, that's something that I would hope that all the improvements that were done a couple decades ago with your group, there should be some kind of drawing that we could adapt or find a way to have a little bit more documentation so we can see, you know, the trails and just improvements as they're made. Because the, you know, the hand-drawn, unless you know the park really well, the hand-drawn diagrams are tough to read.
Yeah.
So if that, there might be some volunteers, either a civil engineer,
I think there
lands-
was something in the open space plan.
Okay, something that would be,
Be what it's looking
okay, that's good. I didn't see that, so I think that would be, it would help us understand it better.
Sure.
But I think it's a great start.
Right now, we think we have a tremendous foundation up there. And there really isn't too much more that is necessary, except for this patch behind the bandstand. You know, except for, like I said, winter kill and things of that nature. But unless they want to expand, there's certainly other areas up around the parking lot that could be improved. Right now, they're just trees, and it's kind of a rough area. But if in the future, if they wanted to beautify that area, that could be done as well. But it's got great, great potential. And I think those of you who have been up there understand what I'm talking about. It is a tremendous asset to the city of Medford.
Well, Thank you for your work over many decades.
Thank
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you want, I can just add, I know you, we've worked with him, I do the Boy Scouts too as well.
That's
A lot-
Yes.
Yes, so a lot of the Eagle Scout projects, we partner with the Friends of Wrights Pond in order for them to basically enhance some of the pathways. We actually do overnight camping trips there, that's what we do for onboarding. One of the first thing we do when we have kids transition from the Cub Scouts to the Boy Scouts, instead of taking them to Maine to camp, we take them up to Wrights Pond, and then we bring someone from the Friends of the Fells to basically teach them in order for them to earn their botanist badge. And then they basically diagram and they mark off all these paths. So that's the partnership that the Boy Scouts do work with the Friends of the Wrights Pond, and they've been a great group for the past 10 years. I was actually one of the first people to have an overnight camping trip up there, and unfortunately I horrified him. I think about 5:30 in the morning, he was coming to basically do his morning chores. But to give you an idea of the historic value that happens here, Wrights Pond was one of the first ponds that basically established the city of Boston to come out and visit. There's still a bus that comes out of Haymarket that drives up and drops them off at the bottom of the ramp, and these people walk up. It goes through Haymarket, through Charlestown, and drops off right at the bottom of Elm Street. That bus is still serviceable today, and the folks and the senior citizens still utilize it in order to come up from the north end, from Charlestown, and from those inner communities in order for them to access the country living, you know what I mean? So they come up and they fish, they come up and they walk those paths. There's a lot of seniors that are from outside of Medford that have used this as a historic perspective for the past 50+ years. When you see a lot of the homes up in that North Medford area, a lot of those homes were cottages for the folks in the north end and the Charlestown, and then they became full season homes as the children grew up and needed a place to live, and they moved up into North Medford because that's where they used to have their cottage to go to Wrights Pond. So that bus still exists, just to give you an idea of the historical perspective of Wrights Pond, the value added that it provides to both seniors and our community groups.
In addition, historically, Wrights Pond area was the scene of one of the first silent movie colonies in America. I don't know how many of you know that, but you could look that up in the Medford Historical Society. And it was in the 1920s, and I don't know, because of funding or whatever, I'm not positive, it was discontinued. Along with that, one of the first ice houses in the area was at Wrights Pond, at the mouth of the pond, and they had an ice house there for commercial reasons. They used to sell the ice, I don't know where, but probably to Florida and other places. That's part of the Medford history, and it's intriguing. It really is intriguing of the history that's up in that area.
Thank you. Actually, that raises a question that maybe either you or Tom Lincoln could answer, which is, does anyone know when it was a man-made pond, when it was made?
I'm not sure when it was made, but I know that we have pictures of it was a brook at one time. It was a farm, and the lifeguards tell me that there's a stone wall under the water that still exists, a wall separating the farm or however, and I don't know the rest of the history about it, but they dammed it up. It's a man-made dam, and they dammed it up, I think, for the ice. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. Did you have it?
It's also tied in somehow to, as I saw Fred Lasky's talk, tied into the broader water system in Boston. At one time, they used some of the ponds up in that area for water supply. Big pond, what is it, not the Spy Pond?
Spot pond.
Spot pond, there we go. Yeah, spot pond. Because the dam was actually repaired or about 10, 15 years ago. But I just wanted to comment on the movie thing, because that's a great story. The movie business actually disappeared there right about the end of World War I, because they discovered that the light and the constancy of light and the quality of light was better in California. But if you go up Elm Street, there's a house there with a big broad porch, and that's where the movie stars of the day would live. And they would take the raw footage and show it in Medford Square at the movie theater that used to be there. But it all kind of disappeared probably by about 1920. But that house really sticks out. It's got a big, beautiful porch, and they had pretty good parties there.
Thank you very much.
Also,
Yes.
if I may, the children's playground area, for those of you who are familiar. At one time, a house sat there owned by Mrs. Morrow. And I knew Mrs. Morrow. She raised collies. And they claim she raised Rin Tin Tin. I don't know if that's true or not. But when Mrs. Morrow died, she willed that home to the city, and with exclusive rights to the Medford Fire Department to burn it down and use the area for Medford residents. That's Mrs. Morrow is her name.
Thank
I don't
you.
know, Tom, if you know anything
I didn't know
about
that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very helpful. That answers a question that I've been thinking about, so. All right, thank you very much. With that, I think that we'll move on to our last applicant of today, which is the Medford Little League.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll be brief. Yeah, right.
Since when?
Hey, what I did was, my name's Bill O'Keefe, I'm with Medford Little League. I played Medford Little League since 1977. I've been involved off and on through the years, part of baseball. We have a lot of board of directors members here. I can introduce them if need be. But what we did was just put a quick video together in order for you to see some of the highlights of our season. We're an all-volunteer group that basically relies heavily on civic organizations and donations from the business community in order to do what we do. This year alone, we actually, what team is this? We can do that from opening day, just to give you an idea. So we start every year basically putting everybody together as a community.
I'm sorry, could you actually speak to the mic? Thank you.
So this is our opening day. We normally do a parade, but because of how the weather's been so off and on every year, we now just walk the home out track. So it's a lot safer, and we just basically bring everybody over to Drain Field and have an opening day event. So we have over 400 kids that participate. Our program basically averages about 600 kids. We have a lot of travel teams. We play 3 seasons. Give you a historical perspective in terms of Little League, we had to merge all the city teams. There was a number of reasons for them, and one of them was financing. But this is Gillis Park.
Gillis Park is one of the oldest fields. This used to be the old high school field before '93. This was a football field prior to it becoming a baseball field, but they also used it as a baseball field too as well. We'll provide some photos so you can see that. This was where Amelia Earhart gave her maiden voyage speech. Right in the football tower was here before she made her.
You guys ain't familiar with that, a little historical.
This is one of these areas that has great improvements and opportunities for so many community groups in the city of Medford. Whether it's the garden club, the art club, or the recreation group. There's so many ample opportunities and visions that can be seen with this field, but it has to be done so safely.
This was done in 2014.
More with vision in terms of what you're looking to accomplish. Behind us, we have the Hegner Center. It's just one of those locations that's been used as a nonprofit for a very long time. Nonprofits have consolidated. Those resources aren't available. It's up to us in the community to bring that back in order to have that return on the investment for our North Medford neighborhood, as well as for our kids, as well as many of our civic organization groups, in order for us to partner together in order to basically not only enjoy the winter and the fall, but the spring and the summer months here at Gillis Park. But in order to do those things, we have to look at our baseball field. This is a baseball field where the community has spent numerous amounts of money basically preserving and maintaining for capital improvements. What we're looking to do is basically put a little shine on this park with these capital improvements so that we have our fencing, as you can see, that's been deteriorating. We have bars up there that aren't welded in that you potentially have the chance of falling. We've had them fall before. We've tried working to get them welded and put together. Obviously, it's a cost factor. These are some of the capital improvements that can be done in order to basically accommodate it. I mean, we've made great strides in terms of basically putting the batting cages in the back. We've landscaped this and refurbished this whole field and spent close to $40,000–$50,000 in the past 4 years, basically upgrading this so the kids can have the opportunity to access. And again, we have communities from outside our city coming in here. We have lots of people that gather. I mean, they like to patronize our businesses, which basically generates revenue. So there's a return on this investment, and that's what we're looking to accomplish here. I mean, reinvesting our own money, recycling our own money by having resources and tools, not only for the kids, but for some other programs that could be available in this city. So when we look at some of the things that we're looking to do, we have our outfield wall here that had a hockey rink put in during the winter, and a result of some of those flooding and other things with that hockey rink, it kind of impacted our wall out there. So parents are concerned about the safety of their kids, and some of the other coaches and from the other teams have brought that up too as well. So I mean, we have a quote in order to have that basically refurbished and painted. We also have a quote in order to basically paint our backstop and have all these fences restored and welded so that they're done safely, so there isn't an opportunity to impact our kids. So again, hopefully with your support, we can partner together short term to make these fixes, and then long term to basically put a vision together in order to build out this whole area for the many groups that we have here in Medford. I think it'll be a positive experience for everybody.
I will set a culture of respect for rules, opponents, officials, teammates, and self-groups. I will look for teachable moments. I will keep my players emotional tanks filled, look for opportunities to give truthful, specific encouragement, expressing appreciation, listening, exhibiting positive body language.
Thank you. Tufts University and the Positive Coaching Alliance, we work with them pretty closely in terms of training the coaches, but just basically working with kids and just making sure they have access and opportunities to positive reinforcements. So that's one of the opportunities that we're trying to provide as a community for the kids in Medford, in the Medford Little League program. What I'd like to do is just provide this opportunity for Mayor Burke to come up and just have to say a couple of words. We partner with her with the Community Preservation Act, and some recreation programs. So I'll just give her an opportunity to say hello.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. It's a great sight out there, seeing this rainbow of colors in our field. And as Tyler said, always do your best. That's all that matters. Always just do the best you can and be a great teammate, because it's so important. You learn these lessons now, and they carry through your entire life. So to all the parents that are helping out, and the parents that are at home throwing balls and take balls and everything else, thank you so much for being a part of this great community. Have fun, play ball.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to ask the kids to come up with their gloves. We have City Council Michael Marks, City Council John Balco, and we have Mia Mastone, who's also a coach. Congratulations, Mia, for stepping up. Johnny's been a coach, Michael Marks has been a coach on this program, so it's been a great opportunity. And here we are, out in left field, which is still at Gillis Park. I mean, we have the opportunity, as you can see, the lights that were put in, those were put in by community volunteers in order for us to have a night game. As you can see, they're working real well. It's just it's a good tribute to Little League when you can play games at night. There's nothing better than playing a game at night. Whether it's youth baseball or adult baseball, I mean, some of the things that we brought up before is some of these benches here, as you can see, for safety concerns. You know what I mean, there's different standards that you need in order to basically have sitting apparatus at fields, and obviously a capital improvement need is obviously required in this opportunity. I mean, as we pan along here too, we're just basically taking a look at, I mean, the fence here that we're looking to basically get fixed. As you can see, some of the damage that was done, and some of the damage that you continue to see is, I mean, just wear and tear with the weather and stuff like that. I mean, we had the opportunity to put a new scoreboard up last year, where we have the sponsorships of Medford Little League as well as Ronnie's Place. So it's a great opportunity for the kids to basically see the scores and maybe work down there at the concession stand and maybe basically upgrade and update that stuff. So it's a good feeling when you have a night game under the lights and you're seeing the scores and stuff like that. In the back, we were able to add 2 batting cages, which came out real nice. They've been over there for a couple of years right now, and you have basically a bunch of the Babe Ruth and senior Babe Ruth kids coming over and high school kids during the summer partaking and utilizing them. It's a good shade and a good opportunity. And as we further go along, we're just looking to basically address some of the issues here in terms of access. I mean, the access point that's over there, it's just not ADA accessible. So our goal is to basically apply for a grant to the Community Preservation Act in order to basically look to have this as the gateway to the park and do something in order to basically make it accessible for all kids, for all parents, and basically for all seniors that come to watch the game. As you'll find on some nights, they won't come into the park because of the ledge that's at the mouth of the park that just it's just not accessible.
So just to give you an idea, I can talk to you about the ADA thing. I mean, we had a player that got injured and broke his leg the first game of the year. He was in a wheelchair. He couldn't attend any of the games. He had to watch them basically from the sidewalk. So with the quote that was provided, we're looking to have an accessibility study done in order to basically determine how to best approach making the park accessible. I mean, everything that's done here, there was an issue in terms of ownership of the park, which basically goes to whether it's maintenance or restoration. There was some Indian folklore that said that the park was left to Little League, so it's Little League's responsibility. We had to get the city solicitor involved. I'm actually an attorney. We had to go to the registry of deeds and prove that Little League does not own the field, that it's the city's responsibility. And I believe, being a new board yourself, you found that out too as well, where Gillis Park wasn't even listed as one of the parks that was presented to this commission in terms of an open space item. So it's just one of those things that an urban legend took a life of its own with regards to this. So no city's money has ever been put into this park. It's all been done by donations and volunteers. There's a need to restore this area in order to bring it up to basically, I mean, a standard that's, I mean, consistent with other communities. When these kids, as well as us as coaches, travel to other cities and towns, there's a certain minimum standard that's being met. We're not meeting that standard. We actually, in 2016, we hosted the sectional championship where Medford ironically ended up being in the finals. They challenged the field because it was not ADA accessible. That 2016 team had to go play in Melrose, and they lost. I mean, we had the opportunity, and Craig Moody and a few of the other people's kids were on the team this year. We ended up making it to the Final Four, and we played out in Millbury, Mass. I mean, this has only happened 4 times in the history of Medford baseball. And this is Little League. This is what kids dream about. You know what I mean? Having the opportunity to have that chance to play on TV. We were 1 game away from playing on ESPN on Sunday night against New Hampshire. Unfortunately, there's a Little League inning in everybody's life, and Medford had that Little League inning. But we're looking to basically bring those opportunities back here to Medford, and in order to do those, you know, I mean, we need funding in order to basically enhance and restore some of these areas. As the board knows, I put in 4 applications to basically restore these parks, and all of them basically fall along the guidelines of safety and accessibility. I mean, only one of them was signed off, which was Gillis Park. I have no idea why the other ones weren't signed off, but there's some significant issues with safety out of these ball fields that need to be addressed. Kids are getting hurt. And it's one of those things where it's like, I can show you the policy that I pull for Little League. I indemnify the city, I indemnify basically Tufts University and the Medford Public Schools, because we also play down at Drain Field too as well. It's just one of those things where there is no maintenance budget, so this is left to us. When we go out to the civic organizations in order to ask them for money, they'll give certain things, but they're not gonna give towards, fences, they're not gonna give towards walls. Like I said, I've met with, the vocational school in order to, see if we can leverage them. We've had Dave Whale and a few other of his contractors come in, and they've actually restored some of the things that needed to get done, that wouldn't impact a lot of the kids' day-to-day operations. But some of the things that we're looking to do here, I think is a win-win for everybody. We partnered with Sherwin-Williams, they're looking to donate all the paint. Ironically, I had the Little League team recognized at Fenway Park on August 28th. I had them have their photos. Basically, they took the national anthem with the Red Sox on the field. And who was basically throwing out the first pitch at the same time? The CEO from Sherwin-Williams was donating the paint to us. He actually thought we scheduled and coordinated this, because he was making the donation on the paint, and he thought we had the Medford Little League kids on the field to thank him. It just so happened to be the same night, there was no planning. I wish I could say we were planning it, but, it just looked great for him in terms of his spirit, and, he was throwing out the first pitch. But in terms of the accessibility study, there's a lot of people in the community that are really looking to have this done. Unfortunately, what happened was, someone went and put that step in July, and they basically assumed that was the fix for accessibility. So it kind of, sent a few people off the wrong way in terms of, geez, this is what the city's gonna do in order to address accessibility. They put a step instead of a slope. So, the study that we have, it's $2,800. I think it's a value add. Some of the things that we're looking to get done, pretty much will help, enhance the area and just basically provide a good experience for all parties involved. Again, this is just one of the first phases in terms of this park here. I think as soon as that gets addressed and the accessibility gets addressed, we'll be looking at something that's ideal and just basically big picture. I bring up the Hegner Center because it's one of those locations. I grew up at the Hegner Center. My father was the postman, so I know all about it. I know there's an apartment above it. That basically, the gentleman from the cemetery used to live up there, and he'd work at the cemetery, and his responsibility was basically paying all the utilities for that house, and that was his cost for basically living there for free. So that was the offset. The space in there is absolutely phenomenal. I know they're talking about the arts department. I'd love to see something with Bistro, with it 479. I'd love to see some sort of culinary arts program, basically be in there for seasonal. That North Medford area is just one of those areas that, it just needs a little bit of a kiss. So if you have something like an ice cream parlor or something where these kids can work at, and just so everybody understands in terms of how we do it for Little League, we have these concession stands. We do a buddy program where we have kids that are basically special needs on the autism spectrum or disabled. We have them working these concession stands in order for them to learn life skills. We're not looking to make money, we're looking to recycle our own money. And by giving these kids the opportunity to do those things, that's basically the return on the investment that we get as a group. So that's why we basically maintain these concession stands. A lot of people question, the value that we bring to them. We're not looking to make money. We're not in the business of making money. We're in the business of making memories. That's kind of how, I've always presented Little League as. There was some things that you guys don't want to know about that happened, that was indictments and people stealing money, and it was a goddamn shame. But the people that knew about it and did nothing, those are the people that I worry about the most. Because it went on for years. We lost $250,000 because people willfully turned their eyes away from basically these people stealing all this money, and this is what we get left with.
Can I ask if there are any questions from the committee members?
I have a couple.
Okay.
I was looking at the application and I have some questions just in terms of what I see.
Sure.
So on the, page where you've got the 3 areas, A, B, and C, the different scopes of work.
Yes.
There's a section that talks about the accessibility study for the
Yes.
3,500, but then if I go down, I see a quote from, KMA for 2,800.
Yes, so it's 2,800 was the quote. I had 3,500 in there as a placeholder until I got the quote. So we received the quote, and the quote came in at 2,800.
And what is the Institute for Human-Centered Design?
That's the second quote that Mike Nestor got from a firm that does similar work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
that-
they're good, yeah.
Why, they're not in here anywhere, that's why I'm asking,
Yeah.
that dollar amount is not
This
anywhere.
was all added,
Okay.
that when Mike Nestor was trying to scope it out a bit.
So just in terms of the 3 things that you wanna do, so as a committee, the thing that we need to do is make sure that as we spend the money, it keeps to the CPA law.
Yeah.
Right? And so the CPA law says that we can't spend CPA money on maintenance. So I'm looking at these 3, obviously the accessibility study is not maintenance. So can you talk a little bit about A and B and
Sure.
tell me?
Yeah, we're restoring basically the original features of the park.
So are you like, let's just talk about the window.
Yeah.
Are you completely replacing that, or are you fixing it?
Completely replacing it.
Okay, and so the part A, this looks like you're not really, I can't tell if you're replacing, if you're just, I mean, you talked a lot about beautification and
Yeah.
that kind of a thing, so that to me sounds like maintenance. So can you talk a little bit about why this isn't maintenance versus capital improvements?
Because it's not being maintained. Right, so we're looking to restore it to its original condition.
Right.
And then have them maintain it. So, again, like I spoke to, this park hasn't been touched in over 30, 40 years because the city said they didn't own it. So it just has been dilapidated to the point where, no one's taking ownership of it. It's similar to what we have with the Hegna Center.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It's just dilapidating because the city said they didn't own it and they had it up for sale for $739,000 because they didn't own it. And then we had to show them the title and the deed to show that they did own it, and then they had to remove it basically from being sold. It's similar to the park here where nothing's been maintained. So our goal is to restore it back to its original features and then basically have the city maintain it.
Have they made that commitment?
The city?
Yeah.
Well, you
City
said,
ever made a commitment?
you just, Bill, you said that the city, you got clarity for the first time in decades about ownership of the property. That's-
Yes, you want, I got the email right.
No, I don't need that. I completely understand. I played Little League in Medford
Yeah.
in my youth, believe me. This is something of my life experience in West Medford Hillside. So I know this field. We mostly
Your father
play.
hit a home run in 1980.
He reminds me of that every Thanksgiving.
Yeah. The first time I heard a swear was from Joe Grant.
But I think part of the open space plan that Claude mentioned earlier, you guys obviously need to get in that game long-term and get a commitment to do what needs to be done here. If you haven't had any maintenance for the city in 3 decades, that's ridiculous, obviously. And they need to step up and make this a priority because they've left you behind for 2 generations.
Well, and again, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
Because similar to them presenting Harris Park. They're presenting Harris Park as a softball field. Do you know how many girls play softball? Less than 200. They've already refurbished 3 of their fields, okay, and spent significant amount of money on those fields. And we haven't had 1 dime spent on any of the baseball fields, and now they're looking to take some of our baseball fields away. We gave up Victory Park, which was fine, to soccer, because at soccer's numbers, they were significantly higher at the time. And that
Sorry.
was years ago, which it was basically a high school field, sorry, guys.
I want to make sure
Yeah.
that we stick to
Yeah.
the questions about this
But
part.
again, it goes to his point in terms of, I'm a volunteer. We're all volunteers here. Us to hold the city accountable for doing things, that's a feat in its own. Like, I have a full-time job and 4 kids. You know what I mean? So for me to basically hold someone's foot to the fire, I can show you 50, 60 emails that go back 10 years that talk about everything that you wanna know about these parks. Nothing's getting done. You know what I mean? It's a community credibility issue. And I can't blame it all on the DPW, because they don't have the numbers to maintain this, okay? We're in a whole new stage here in Medford. We're at the pioneering stages in terms of what we're gonna look like. You know what I mean? So how we present ourselves is similar to basically everybody coming to this park. We had 4 different cities come to this park and question the significance of it, both from a safety standpoint and just a basic upgrade main point, like when you guys upgrade this.
So that actually leads to a question that I had, which is that clearly the park appears to be in need of an upgrade. And the improvements that are on the scope for this ask from the CPA, my question is whether those improvements are things that are going to be made obsolete if a couple of years from now the park gets a bigger overhaul. So
That's
for
not-
example.
that's not- I can't answer that question.
Yeah, so.
It's the same thing with the Brooks Estates.
Well, the question is, in this park, if you are making improvements to the wall or the fencing, are those things going to then, a couple years from now, be replaced again?
No.
Or are you asking for improvements that, you know, say you need to make what we anticipate might need to be changed in the park in the next few years?
No.
Are those
We have to meet
changes?
Little League standards.
Right. Are the changes
We're not.
that, right, but there's more than these couple of projects that you've asked for this year that need to be done in order to meet the standards, I imagine.
Only one is before you right now, because the other ones
Right.
didn't get approved,
Of this park.
of this park.
So the question is whether the things that are on the scope right now are going to be overwritten if there are further changes to the park.
Why would there be changes to the park?
If for example, the ADA accessibility study highlights the need for grading or other changes near the entrance of the park in order to make a more accessible entrance, if there are other elements of the park that need improvements.
On that side of the wall with ADA, that's not gonna impact the playing field or the fences.
Okay, that's what I
Yeah,
just want
yeah.
assurance
Yeah.
that the things that you're asking for.
That would be, because there's ample space here. That's the other thing, like in terms of like the garden club, like the floor plan that I provided, you know what I mean, it was the first time people saw it, you know what I mean, because it was at the Registry of Deeds. Like when you look at this, this is the line here,
Yep.
in terms of the property line. The fence is back in here, okay, and we've maintained all these shrubberies here. So if you're looking in terms of big picture, this Hegner Center here, you know what I mean, this whole area, you know what I mean, can get redesigned and redeveloped. How we used to do it with the people that were disabled, we had them park in the parking lot up here and have them basically walk down through the gate. And then mysteriously one day a lock showed up on it during the playoff game, and it was just bolted shut, and the parking lot was bolted shut, and they said, oh, the owners of the property did that. You know what I mean? We had to research to find out that the owners of the property were the city of Medford. You know what I mean? So, like, I'll play the cat and mouse game all day, but at the end of the day, you know what I mean, the room that's available in order to basically make this ADA accessible is gonna go into the design and scope of what needs to get done. The problem is thinking out of the box. Everybody wants to think, well, this is the entrance, so we have to have this as the entrance. No, you don't. You walk down the field and say, you know something? This is a better entrance down here, and then grade it in order to make it ADA accessible. I mean, we had the same issue when we had the Field of Dreams, where they didn't wanna basically put in an access ramp. People had to think outside the box in order to do that. And it was successful. And these people that are basically the ones that are looking to get hired, they do this nationally. I mean, I'm a project manager for Bank of America, so, I mean, I deal with this all the time. I'm also an ADA attorney. I'm not concerned in terms of what's gonna happen when they go in and design it, because it's gonna be done tastefully and aesthetically pleasing, so that it basically balances off both the park as well as the experience. And that's what we're looking for, in terms of a big picture.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members? Yes.
Well, thank you for all your the volunteer work of everybody who came tonight.
Yeah,
It's
appreciate
obviously
it.
a labor of love, and it benefits
Listen,
a lot of
if you're a
kids.
volunteer in Medford, you have to enjoy being punished.
Well, we're not trying to punch you here, but we do have to try to follow the state rules too, to make sure that we're spending the money appropriately.
I understand completely.
And so I did have one question. When you mentioned about the improvements to the wall, and you said that it got turned into like an ice rink at one point, and that did damage to the wall. So does that happen every winter? Is that gonna?
It'll never happen again.
The damage of the rink.
Okay.
It was an illegal rink that the park board never authorized to be there. Am I correct on stating that?
As far as I know.
Right.
Okay.
So,
That was my question.
yeah, and unfortunately, and I mean, the volunteers went down and, did yeoman's work in terms of restoring it and putting it back so that it wasn't a safety issue. Our goal here is to restore it to its natural beauty. The money we've spent on this, like, just to give you an idea, we basically had to do all the drainage over, and we had to basically skim the field. That cost us $25,000, and then we had to take out all the shrubs that were around the park because they were just overgrown, and no one was maintaining them. When we did that, we put a batting cage in the back. That batting cage gets utilized constantly. It's just one of those things where it's like, where's the return on the investment? We just had the concession stand because of how it's graded from the street. In the storms in the winter, all the water runs down and it rotted out the concession stand floor. Everybody will agree, any of these things that are down here are classified as fixtures, correct? And fixtures are what? Property of the city. Their response is, it's not our responsibility to maintain. So here's where lies the problem. We have to have volunteers come down, donate product, labor, get things squared away, and it's money out of our pocket in order to maintain an experience for the kids in our community. And again, we have volunteers, and I'm assuming you guys are volunteers too, but, it's that whole, like, all we're looking to do is restore it to its original condition, and then basically, work to have a maintenance account. And again, the folks that are behind me, they're looking to do the same thing. If we have to put an action plan and a memorandum of understanding together, I think that was something that was talked about, in terms of getting a contract with the city. I don't have a problem doing that. I have no problem. I've been negotiating my whole life. It's free arguments for me. That's kind of how I see it. I'm not getting paid to do it, but if I have to do it, I'll do it in order to leave that legacy behind so that there'll still be Little League Baseball here.
Well, ideally,
John started in 1954.
Ideally, it would be great to have a kind of a master plan or a design for the parks and a maintenance and
what was her name? What was that woman's name that was here
Clodagh.
earlier? And Doug,
Ally.
you brought it up?
Ally Fisk, you mean?
No.
Clodagh.
The woman
Oh,
prior.
Clodagh, yes, sorry.
Yes, the woman prior. When you brought that up, that's all what we look for. We have we have 26 parks here. If we could, have a seat at the table. There's a lot of intelligent people here. It's like, everybody thinks the politicians are the ones that have the solutions, and unfortunately, they don't. It's the private industry that basically will provide the input and the recognition in order to get things done. It's their tax dollars. They should have a voice in it.
Well, it
just
looks like there's
everybody
gonna
else
be that, the new open space plan is gonna begin, so it'd be
Provide the
great for you guys to be
opportunity to do
involved
that.
with that.
We'd love to. We'd love to.
So actually, I just want to finally clarify, it's kind of what I asked before, but I just want to clarify the vision for this park, the things that you've asked for in the scope of this plan. Do you see further changes being needed after this, or in what state, like how many stages of improvements do you see this park needing in order to be brought up to the standards that it needs to be?
I can speak candidly that
Yeah.
after this is done here,
Mm-hmm.
and then the accessibility study's done, and they make their recommendations, that's probably it. We already have the lights down there. My biggest thing is the Hegner Center and the collaboration that can provide to the community. That's a value added. That's an untapped resource that I know, I mean, the art center's looking at it, I mean, you can have the recreation group, there's space for the garden club down at the Hegner Center in Gillis Park. I mean, you can even put a bocce court down there if you want to. There's enough room. So it's all on what you want to do in terms of a vision, and what this community wants to do as a vision for that North Medford area. Same thing with, Carr Park and Tufts Park. I mean, the reason why the Community Preservation Commission was put together was to restore the integrity of the items that you guys are basically working on, which is the historical, open space, and recreation. We don't want it outsourced to third parties to have them manage in order for them to reap the benefits of it. Let us recycle our own money and do it on our own. I mean, these concession stands and, using the vocational services that are available, those are the life skills that, make quality of life in Medford a lot better when we start to access them for not only our kids, but for the next generation. And there's a plan and a template that speaks to that, so that we don't have to worry about who's gonna be basically the gatekeeper after we're gone. We set it as a cookie cutter, and that's basically how it should work going forward. And I hope that's the goal and the mission of what this board's looking to do, because there's a lot of money. There's a lot of money, and you're not gonna have a lot of applicants come in. And I hate to see this become just like one of those patronage farms for political agendas, you know what I mean? My biggest concern with a lot of this money is that, it's gonna be self-serving, and I hope it's not gonna happen that way. I hope there's really gonna be resources that are basically gonna be available for this community.
That's
And
our
I don't
goal
say it
too.
to basically, throw a nudge at you, but, it's hard to have a lot of this money and spend it. This is your first go-around with it. I'm sure it was hard to digest, like, wow, there's a lot of money. And there's only gonna be more money coming, so, I appreciate what you do, I laud what you do, no good deed goes unpunished, so.
Thank you very much. Is there any other comment that anyone wanted to make?
I'll just make a comment, just from a resident, parent, coach perspective. Just comparing the other cities or communities that we, I guess, are categorized by district. Somerville, Medford, East Boston, Melrose, Everett, that's the one. I'd say out of those, and our team is, our group of kids year in, year out competes and probably wins that grouping, more often than not. It's probably the last in terms of facilities. Again, just a general observation. I know there's a lot that goes into it. Billy, eloquently outlined our need here, but it's probably the worst out of those 6 communities, I would say. Columbus is a different animal a little bit, but just to offer that perspective. The way the community's trending and going, it shouldn't be.
Thank you.
A lot of, excuse me. a
I'm
lot
sorry,
of the other parks that I'm sorry.
hold on for 1 second. Can I get your name again?
Craig Moody.
Craig Moody?
I'm sorry for saying, but I've seen a lot of the other parks and a lot of the other cities, but Craig was saying they are kept spotless.
Yeah. And you gave your name earlier, but I just want to
Edward
get.
Messina.
He's a Yankees fan, if you didn't know this.
Edward Messina, thank you.
Hopefully they lose tomorrow.
Yes.
Mike Torello. We just wanna make the point that this park is used, 9 months out of the year for the kids, and it's all about the kids. And it's almost deplorable what condition it's in. And the only reason it's in reasonable condition is the efforts of all these coaches and other coaches that go there beforehand and clean it and rake it and fix it and prepare it so it looks reasonable. But the bottom line is the infrastructures need to be replaced. These are your children. These are the kids that are there playing games. Safety and teaching them lessons and so forth. These are very important facilities that should be maintained by the city, and it's ridiculous that we have to do the work for it. It doesn't make any sense. This is very important, these ballparks and these kids. It's a big learning experience for all the kids. It's something that I think everyone should take very seriously. We have a lot of kids go through there, and it builds them for the future of everything they're gonna do, playing this wonderful game of baseball. And we're just asking for a reasonable facility for them to do that.
You wanna keep them off the streets. You wanna keep them off the streets. Let them keep playing. And baseball gives character to kids growing up. I've played it, not to say anything about myself, but I've played it for so many years, and it builds character. And you gotta keep them off the streets, because there's too much drugs and all that stuff going around. Let them play, let them enjoy life. Let them grow up healthy, strong, and that's what baseball does.
Bill, one more thing. I think, like, I mean, the kids kind of love Gillis anyway, which is I mean, they should. It's a great place. It's a meeting place for a lot of different people to congregate, but it has so much more potential. It could be a really cool park of the future for the city if
People like
we look in that direction.
Thank you.
That's basically it.
Yeah, it's a community field. You don't see many like it. Like one thing I'll say, we travel, we play a lot of summer ball. Gillis has character that most other parks don't have.
It does.
And I think we just need to put the money in it, you know, to make it what it should be.
Either that or we move to Yankee Stadium. I don't know what to say.
No. And to give you an idea too, like 1947, my father played for the Medford High Mustangs. They went to the championship game. They played in the Gator Bowl when high school teams were able to play in those collegiate bowls. So they went down to Fort Lee, Mississippi, and had a 0-0 tie. But it was at Gillis Park. I mean, Gillis Park has a very historical perspective for a lot of people, not only in Medford, but outside of Medford too as well. So when they come here, I mean, I was gonna ask Joe Grandy to come. Joe was a teacher at the high school and, I mean, spent basically, I mean, most of his adult life maintaining Gillis Park. He doesn't have the opportunity to access it because, I mean, he's old. I mean, we got him a plaque last year, we got it up down the field. I mean, we got a Hall of Fame wall that we're recognizing a lot of people that have made some great contributions to the community. And I mean, we're actually recognizing Lonnie Hilson, who basically took the only state championship 12-year-old team basically to Williamsport. And to give you a little history on that, Joe Sacco was the assistant coach for the Bruins. He was an 11-year-old that played on that team. So.
Thank you.
I mean, it's tough to build on. If I can, I'm just gonna leave you a book here. I mean, these have all the bleachers and things in it. I mean, none of the bleachers or any of the park meet any type of standards or requirements. Just to give an idea of the quotes, this is what I put in on my other quotes that didn't get signed off on. I mean, if there is extra money, I mean, that's what ideally we'd look to do. I mean, most of the bleachers, I mean, until we caught the people, they were basically dragging them out onto the street, put them in a truck, and then scrapping them over at the Everett Aluminum. So, I mean, we don't have a lot of them left, but the ones we do have left don't meet code.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure, no, appreciate your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you to the committee members. I believe that concludes our agenda for this evening.
Tom, thank you. Baseball field.
Is there a motion
Thank
to
you.
adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.